So I just finished chapter 3 of the Lean Startup, and in this chapter, Eric Ries makes an extremely important point about what a startup should be doing. A startup shouldn't be thinking about whether something can be built. A startup should be thinking about whether something should be built and how it should be built in a way that actually moves core metrics forward. Now, how you do that is you run product experiments. You go through the build, measure, learn feedback loop where you build something in the most minimal fashion possible based on assumptions you made about your users, and then you build it out, then you measure the feedback that you get, and then you learn from that feedback by conducting customer interviews and really thinking about the user behaviors in response to whatever you've built. When it comes to going through the build, measure, learn feedback loop, how exactly do you know if what you've built actually should be continued forward, should be thought about as part of the next iteration of the product that you will be working on? The answer is you should be focusing on what's called validated learning, which Eric Ries defines as learning from something that has actually moved the core metrics of your startup. Maybe revenue has increased, maybe user engagement has increased, maybe the bounce rate on your site has decreased as a result of this newest iteration of the product that you've created. Think in terms of core metrics. What are you trying to measure as an indicator for whether what you've built actually makes sense to your customer? If you don't really have any metrics in mind, how can you really tell if something that you've built is actually satisfying your users, not based on what they say, but based on how they act? Are they paying you more? Are they spending more time on your site, if that's the metric you're tracking? That's what really validated learning is. It's not compliments. The last thing you should be going for is compliments. It's not really about getting the right answer right off the bat. It's about getting to the process of building something that people actually want. And it's an iterative process because the assumptions you have about the users for your product, the customers, those assumptions might not exactly be correct right off the bat. And that is because as a startup, you're working in a very high uncertainty environment. You don't know who your users are, or you don't have the correct understanding of who exactly is going to be using your product. And the way to create certainty around your users, around the product you should be building, is by running experiments. Hence the importance of the build, measure, learn feedback loop. It's not about going all in into one understanding of the product that you think is absolutely correct and then just ignoring all the feedback you're getting for that product. It's instead defining what you think your users want, building a minimal version of that product, testing it with your users, and then seeing how they respond. And the magnitude of that response is going to define your direction going forward. Are you going to stick to whatever you've built, or are you going to go back to the drawing board? That's what building a product is about. It's not about having dogma and then just sticking to whatever you think is correct. It's instead taking a step back and really thinking about how your users are going to respond to what you've built, and then making a decision based on the feedback that you're getting on what you've built. And then having the confidence to admit that something was wrong, something doesn't work, because only by admitting that something doesn't work can you go in a better direction. So that's it for chapter 3 of Eric Ries's The Lean Startup. The bottom line is building a product is an iterative process that involves a lot of learning. And when you're learning, you fail a lot. A lot of things that you thought were going to work with the users that you have aren't going to work.